The philosophy of nihilism. The rejection of all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. This nihilistic perspective seems to have crept into the minds of a large percentage of the human population. While I personally don't believe organized religion is necessary for spiritual enlightenment, I do believe morals and self-discipline are required. The idea that we came from nothing and are going to end up as nothing is a thought process that condemns a person to nihilism, in which such thoughts are conceived as "do as thou wilt." I completely support having freedom to make your own choices. However, that's not to say we shouldn't try to make correct choices. We have seen a decline in morals more recently, and most everyone has the "I don't give a" attitude and "do as thou wilt" mindset, which creates a world full of inconsiderate and selfish people who actually believe to be in the right because, in their mind, all they're doing is looking out for number one. What it actually means to look out for number one is to put other people down to boost yourself up. Because in the mind of a nihilist, there is no reason to go out of their own way to help another individual, since after all, everyone is just a result of random coincidences. What ultimately causes the common consensus of a population to drift towards nihilism? I believe media plays the largest role. What if when Hollywood started making films, the America in which they portrayed was in fact a false one? People tend to identify with their favorite characters in TV shows or movies. Oftentimes we see that the main characters have a nihilistic outlook on life, or a lack of morals. If a person were to identify with one of these main characters and shape their personality according to the behaviors of this fictional character, they would likely end up having at least a slightly nihilistic perspective. In more recent times, social media has been one of the main platforms for nihilism. The same way Hollywood has portrayed a false version of America, certain memes could be portraying false ideas. Could it be possible that many of the memes or posts that are frequently shared have actually been concocted by a group or organization that has anything but our best interest in mind? This nihilistic outlook also renders people lazy and unwilling to improve, where now, instead of coming up with original thoughts and ideas, people just share ideas that have already been expressed by some other person or entity of some sort. And if the influencer happens to have a lack of morals or an overall negative perspective on life, then the impressionable audience turns towards the philosophy of nihilism. Perhaps the second largest reason many people have a nihilistic perspective is mainstream science, which claims the universe of chaotically spinning balls was created 13.8 billion years ago, when nothing exploded into everything, and by random happenstance, living organisms formed, which eventually created monkeys, which eventually evolved into modern humans. Believing in all that nonsense may give someone the impression that life is meaningless, which, if I am to be a true skeptic, I must confess I could not 100% prove to be untrue. However, the evidence in favor of this world being intelligently created and that human beings hold much more potential than is ever fully expressed seems to be too abundant to ceaselessly entertain such a theory. I believe these psychological attacks on the masses through the mainstream media and mainstream science or news outlets are just one more way to separate people from their true spiritual being. After looking into many different theories, I've realized that you cannot trust mainstream science or mainstream history. It's obvious there has been a sort of war going on for hundreds or thousands of years, and it seems to be a type of spiritual war. It seems to me that the creator of this world, or God, only desires to create good things. So everything God creates is good, but like the parable of the wheat and the tares found in the Bible, an enemy has come and sowed the seeds of negativity in our world. If our thoughts have the potential to create the world, then is it possible that we have brought about negative things, such as parasites and poisonous plants and animals, by having negative thoughts? Has an adversary caused us to have such thoughts? So there has been negativity introduced to an otherwise positive world by the devil or demons, or perhaps just by negative thoughts alone. The two opposing forces could be called spiritual and material. The spiritual would be the masculine energy, and the material will be the feminine energy. Which is why we live in the matrix, which consists of matter, and we often refer to it as Mother Nature. It is the maternal or motherly energy, and spirit is what impregnates matter. You can obviously just look at human anatomy and see that females are negative and males are positive. And obviously, negative is not to be considered a completely bad thing, because we need to balance both opposing forces. What I've come to realize is that thoughts create reality, and thoughts could possibly be considered spiritual. So our thoughts, which could be considered the fatherly energy, are what actually later manifest in the physical world. So matter is in a sense subservient to spirit, because matter is a result of things first conceived in the spiritual realm, which could be why God is often thought to be a male, and all the prophets in the Bible were men. In today's society, we are seeing a rise in the feminine energy. While I completely agree that both genders should have equal rights, it's quite obvious that each gender is designed to play a specific role in life, meaning that women were clearly designed to care for their children in early development, and men were clearly made to handle physical labor to provide for the family. And so the rise in the feminine energy that we are seeing today is not being implemented in a good way, because in actuality, all they are doing is confusing the gender roles to the point that future generations will be clueless as to what the true gender roles are. All of this nonsense stems from materialist ideologies. And again, the physical or material would be the feminine energy, and the goal will be to balance the feminine energy with the masculine or spiritual energy. So could it be that these now popular feminist ideologies are manifesting because of the influence of a negative force? Materialist ideologies have been in the mainstream for quite some time now, and this materialist perspective has prevented real information about the spiritual realm from being in the mainstream narratives. It has also prevented much scientific progress. Nikola Tesla said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all previous centuries of its existence." Materialism has taken away the true meaning of life and has made people more self-centered and greedy. Because if we only exist by coincidence and there is nothing for us after death, then there is no reason to try to be a good person or better yourself. And so, if someone is a materialist, then they might agree with Anton LaVey when he said, "If you're going to be a sinner, then be the best sinner on the block." I believe the heliocentric worldview was largely responsible for the rise in materialism. With this idea came the Big Bang and evolution, as well as the notion we are chaotically hurtling through space. Before this idea was pushed, people knew the truth about where they lived and understood this world was intelligently designed. It is said that many of the ancients were sun worshippers, and many people believe sun worship to be evil. I'm not sure if it is evil or not. Perhaps only ancient cultures who practiced the evil teachings worshiped the sun, and there were other ancient cultures that practiced good teachings and didn't worship the sun. I've also heard the idea that sun worship was not necessarily a bad thing, and that the cultures that worshiped the sun knew of the existence of God, but they viewed the sun as God's most visible representative, and so they showed reverence to it. Also because the fact that without the sun, food wouldn't grow and they would have to endure coldness and darkness. Copernicus, who first proposed the idea that the sun is at the center of the universe, got this idea from ancient sun worship. The assumption he made was that if the ancients worshipped the sun, then it would make more sense if the sun was at the center of the universe. This idea was not widely accepted for quite some time, and people still knew the truth about the shape and placement of the earth. However, the controllers of this world persisted until the heliocentric model was mainstream. Before, when people knew the true shape of the earth and knew that it was the center of the universe, there was no denying God. It was too obvious that there was some type of creator. With the globe model, there is much speculation, and the mainstream narrative is that this world is a result of a random accident. The uncertainty the heliocentric model provides definitely makes people question the existence of a creator, and it is quite easy for someone to believe there is no point to life. This ultimately leads to a materialistic and nihilistic perspective on life, which results in selfish behavior. We must all become aware of the lies we have been told, and acknowledge that there is divine purpose for all of us being here.
Has society as a whole become more selfish, egotistical, and overall more narcissistic? Well, what is a narcissist? A narcissist is a person who has an excessive interest in or admiration of themselves. They lack empathy and have little to no care for the needs of others. We see this self-admiration and lack of care for others becoming increasingly more prevalent in modern society. People are becoming more detached from those around them and more into themselves. Because of this, the importance of family and close relationships are diminishing. People are using so-called self-love and self-care as an excuse to not help or associate with those whom they deem as toxic individuals. This often includes family and close friends. Obviously, there are times when distancing yourself from certain individuals is necessary, but I feel this is happening far too often today. Jesus Christ taught that we should have love towards one another, including our enemies. But it seems that more and more people are going away from these teachings, choosing to focus on themselves. I believe this leads to further isolation and increased mental health issues. I also believe that the best way a person can help themselves is by helping others. A narcissist may seem confident on the surface, but on the inside, their self-esteem is suffering. This is because their focus is on themselves and how they're not as good or better than those around them. This is why they tend to attack and belittle certain people who they view as a threat to their fragile ego. This behavior is becoming more and more common, especially in the rising generation. Another sign of narcissism is superficiality. Mainstream media has become and is becoming way more fake and superficial than it has in the past. Characters in new movies tend to be very shallow. Much of the new music lacks real depth and meaning. Sports are becoming way less competitive and team-focused, and more about individual players who only care about their stats. I've also noticed that many people don't really get to know one another very well. They'll ask the basic shallow questions about work and school and how much money they make, but very few go deeper than that. People are constantly posting on social media, portraying how great their life is, when in reality, they're not happy at all. Another thing that happens a lot on social media is people looking for praise for doing good deeds. People who do this are typically known as communal narcissists. They'll help others and animals only when others see it. Their good deeds are not for others, but for themselves. They may seem like good people to strangers, but the people who are close to them typically view them as abusive in some way. Their good deeds are completely inauthentic. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, in the New Testament it says, "Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thy alms may be in secret, and thy Father, which seeth in secret, himself shall reward thee openly." End quote. Another thing I've noticed is that many people today feel they are better and superior to others because of their achievements and possessions. I feel that society has pushed this upon many of us from a very early age. We're taught that the amount of money we have determines how successful we are. This pattern continues into adulthood and affects the way we see others and ourselves. Many people grow up thinking it's okay to judge and look down upon those who have less than them, and people who have less are envious of those who have more. This is because society as a whole judges people based off what they have and not who they are. Obviously, I think it's important to be self-reliant in this material world, but I feel we are unbalanced and drifting too far from the spiritual side of things. These are just a few ways in which society has become more narcissistic. I believe the best way for us to combat this behavior in our world is to do all we can to rid ourselves of these behaviors. If we focus on the spiritual, along with the physical, we can become more balanced and connected to ourselves and everything around us.